The diary smelled wrong, like copper pennies and burnt matches, though it had been sitting in the school basement for God knows how long. Sarah Brook pulled it free from behind the filing cabinet, disturbing decades of dust that made her sneeze twice in quick succession. She'd come down here looking for old maps of the Industrial Revolution, something to make Monday's lesson less tedious for both her and the fourth formers. Instead, she'd found this leather-bound thing wedged so tightly against the wall that retrieving it scraped her knuckles raw. The basement storage room had no windows, just bare bulbs strung along the ceiling, casting harsh shadows between towers of mouldering boxes. The furnace clanked somewhere beyond the concrete walls. 3 times. Pause. Twice more. Sarah knew that rhythm. The school's ancient heating system had been making that exact pattern since she'd started teaching here 4 years ago. She should have left the diary where it was. Should have grabbed her maps and climbed back up to the staff room where Mrs. Pargeter would be complaining about the new national curriculum over instant coffee that tasted like dishwater. But the cover felt warm under her fingers. When she opened it, she saw her own handwriting, not similar to hers. Hers exactly, down to the way she crossed her 7s and curved the tails of her lowercase g's. The first entry was dated March 15th, 1986. Today's date. Another basement expedition. Found the maps behind the Wellington boxes. Henshaw's ankle tomorrow. Tell him about the loose floorboard near the gymnasium. Sarah's throat constricted. She flipped forward, pages crackling. April entries. May. June. Years blurring past. 1987, 1990, 1995. Her handwriting evolved, growing shakier, more compressed. Arthritis, maybe. Age. The entries became shorter, more cryptic. References to people she didn't know, events that hadn't happened, technologies that didn't exist. 2001. Twin Towers. Tried to warn. Letters intercepted. Cannot change the big things. 2008. Market crash Thursday. Pulled pension Wednesday. Guilt. 2020. Lockdown starts. Already prepared. So many sick. Mrs. Pargeter's daughter among them. Sarah slammed the diary shut. Her breath came in short bursts that echoed off the basement walls. Mrs. Pargeter didn't have a daughter. The woman was barely 40 and perpetually single, devoted entirely to her Siamese cats and Victorian literature. The furnace clanked its rhythm. 3. Pause. 2. Pull yourself together, Sarah muttered, her voice too loud in the confined space. She was 34 years old, a sensible woman who graded essays with a red pen and kept her life in meticulous order. She did not believe in fortune-telling or prophecy or whatever this was. She opened the diary again, more carefully, flipped to tomorrow's date, March 16th, 1986. Henshaw breaks ankle on gymnasium floorboard. Out 6 weeks. Morrison substitutes, badly. 3 students fail their A-levels as direct result. Sarah knew the floorboard. Everyone did. A warped plank near the parallel bars that had been scheduled for repair since 1983. Budget cuts. Always budget cuts. She turned more pages, scanning for patterns, logic, some explanation that would make this mundane instead of impossible. The entries grew stranger. References to preventing disasters, to watching the diary rewrite itself, to something called temporal displacement. Her future self seemed resigned, methodical, treating catastrophe like items on a shopping list. November 1986. Factory explosion prevented. 17 saved. Diary changed. New date. February 2nd, 2029. 3 years lost. Sarah didn't understand the last part. 3 years lost from what? She found the final entry. A single line on the last page. The handwriting so deteriorated it barely looked human. February the 2nd, 2029. I disappear from this time. The basement door creaked open above her. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Deliberate. Probably Mr. Henshaw doing his evening rounds, checking locks and windows before heading home to his empty flat and television dinners. Sarah shoved the diary into her canvas bag between unmarked essays on the English Civil War. She grabbed the Industrial Revolution maps almost as an afterthought, and climbed toward the rectangle of yellow light above. Henshaw stood at the top of the stairs, jangling his massive keyring. He had a particular way of standing, weight always on his left leg, right foot turned slightly outward. Childhood polio he'd mentioned once. The vaccine had come just a year too late for him. "Working late again, Miss Brook?" His breath smelled of peppermints and the cigarettes he thought nobody knew about. "Just fetching some maps," Sarah said, surprised her voice sounded normal. "For Monday's lesson. Mind yourself on the gymnasium floor tomorrow," she added, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "That loose board near the parallel bars. Someone should put a cone there or something." Henshaw's eyebrows drew together. "How did you—" "I only just noticed it myself an hour ago. Was going to report it in the morning." Sarah's mouth went dry. "Oh, must have seen it earlier. During PE. You don't teach PE?" "No. Right. I meant—" "I walked through. Shortcut." Henshaw studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. "I'll put a cone there tonight. Can't be too careful." He moved aside to let her pass. Sarah climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, the diary in her bag feeling heavier with each step. She didn't sleep that night. Cromwell, her elderly tabby, seemed to sense her distress and sprawled across her lap as she sat at her kitchen table, reading by the light of a single lamp. Outside, rain began around midnight, drumming against the windows of her terraced house. The diary entries painted a portrait of increasing desperation. Her future self had started small, warning people about minor accidents, suggesting different routes to avoid traffic incidents. But each intervention had consequences. The diary would change, she'd written. New futures spawning from altered presents. New disasters replacing old ones. Sarah found a cluster of entries from 1987. May 3rd, warned Thompson about the scaffolding. He lived. His son, driving to hospital to see him, did not. May 4th, diary changed overnight. Thompson entry gone. New entry, his son's accident. Tried to warn son. Too late. Already happened. Cannot change the past. Only future from point of reading. May 5th. Understanding the rules. Every change costs time. My final date moves closer. February 2nd, 2035 now. 4 years lost for one life saved. The mathematics of heroism. Sarah made tea at 3 in the morning. Earl Grey, too strong, no milk. The kitchen felt smaller than usual, pressing in. She could hear the couple next door arguing through the thin walls. Something about money. Always about money these days. The factories were closing one by one. Her father had worked at British Steel before the layoffs. Now he spent his days at the Working Men's Club, playing dominoes and pretending optimism. She returned to the diary, reading her future self's increasingly frantic attempts to understand the mechanism. Theories about temporal loops, branching timelines, the diary as anchor point. But no explanation for how it existed, why it had appeared, what disappearing from this time actually meant. One entry stood out, dated 1992. Visited physics professor at Cambridge. Hypothetical questions only. He mentioned quantum observation. Act of reading fixes possibility into reality. Diary exists because I will write it. Will write it because it exists. Causalityloop. No beginning, no end, only middle where I am trapped. At 5:30, Sarah dressed for work. Sensible skirt, cardigan, the bronze brooch her mother had left her. She looked normal in the mirror. Tired, perhaps, but then she always looked tired. Teaching teenagers British history would exhaust anyone. She arrived at school early, before even the custodial staff. The gymnasium was dark, but she knew exactly where the loose floorboard was. She found Henshaw's orange cone and placed it carefully, weighting it down with a spare textbook so it wouldn't shift. Such a small thing. A cone. A warning. A man's ankle saved from breaking. She thought about the diary's entry. 3 students failing their A-levels because Morrison would substitute badly for an injured Henshaw. Lives derailed by such tiny hinges. The morning proceeded normally until 10:45, when Sarah heard the commotion from the gymnasium. Not screaming or panic, just voices raised in surprise, then laughter. Through her classroom window she watched Henshaw emerge, walking normally, carrying the orange cone. He spotted her looking and gave a small wave, tapping his right ankle and mouthing, "Thank you." Sarah's stomach lurched. She turned back to her third formers, who were copying notes about the corn laws from the blackboard. Timothy Marsh was flicking paper balls at Rebecca Chen when he thought Sarah wasn't looking. Everything normal, everything wrong. During lunch, she locked herself in the staff toilet and pulled out the diary. Her hands shook as she found today's date. The entry had changed. New handwriting, still hers, but different somehow, smoother. March 16th, 1986. Henshaw fine. Morrison doesn't substitute. 3 students pass A-levels. Thompson twins to Oxford, Chen to medicine, but Richardson takes Henshaw's shift. Boiler explosion minor. 3 weeks recovery. His wife leaves him during recovery. Suicide attempt October. Sarah's throat constricted. Richardson was the young science teacher, barely 25, always whistling in the corridors. His wife had just had a baby. She flipped forward, looking for more about Richardson, but found something else. Her final date had changed, January 15th, 2029. She'd lost 3 weeks, for saving Henshaw's ankle. Just an ankle, she whispered to the empty bathroom. Just a stupid ankle. But it wasn't, was it? It was Thompson twins at Oxford, Chen becoming a doctor, lives blooming in directions they wouldn't have otherwise grown. Someone knocked on the door. "Everything all right in there?" Mrs. Pargetter's voice, concerned. "Fine," Sarah called back. "Just something I ate. There's Pepto in the staff room, top shelf, behind the biscuits." Sarah listened to Mrs. Pargetter's footsteps retreat. She studied the diary entry again. Boiler explosion. When? Where? The entry didn't say, but Richardson taking Henshaw's shift suggested evening. The man always stayed late, preparing experiments for the next day. She had hours to figure this out, hours to decide if Richardson's marriage was worth 3 more weeks of her own, what? Life? Existence? The diary never explicitly said she'd die, only that she'd disappear from this time. The afternoon dragged. Sarah taught the English Civil War on autopilot, Cavaliers and Roundheads, King Charles and his execution, the interregnum. Her students sensed her distraction. Even Timothy Marsh paid attention, perhaps worried she'd snap at him. After final bell, Sarah lingered in her classroom, watching Richardson through the window as he helped students into their parents' cars. He had a particular way of crouching to child height, making himself less intimidating. His red hair caught the afternoon sun. So young, so eager, so unprepared for what was coming. At 4:30, she made her decision. She found Richardson in the chemistry lab, setting up tomorrow's demonstration, something with copper sulfate that would turn the most bored teenager into a temporary enthusiast. "Tom?" she said from the doorway. He looked up, surprised. They'd barely spoken beyond pleasantries in the staff room. "Sarah, everything all right? I need a favor. Rather urgently, actually." She stepped into the lab. It smelled of sulfur and chalk dust. "My father, he's been having some trouble with his home heating. You're good with mechanical things, aren't you?" Richardson brightened. He was the sort of person who lived to be helpful. "What sort of trouble?" "The boiler makes this awful clanking. I'm worried it might be dangerous. Carbon monoxide or explosion or something." The lie came easily. Too easily. "I know it's a terrible imposition, but could you possibly look at it this evening?" "I'd pay you, of course." "Don't be silly, no payment necessary." He was already pulling off his lab coat. "Let me just ring Helen. Let her know I'll be late." Sarah watched him dial from the staff room phone, watched him smile at whatever his wife said, watched him make kissing sounds at the baby. Her chest felt tight. They drove to her father's house in Richardson's Morris Minor, making small talk about students and curriculum changes. Sarah's father was at the Working Men's Club, as she knew he would be. She let them in with her spare key. The boiler was ancient but functional, making its usual wheeze and gurgle. Richardson spent an hour checking it anyway, tightening valves, testing joints. He found nothing wrong because there was nothing wrong, but he didn't make Sarah feel foolish about it. "Better safe than sorry," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "These old systems can be temperamental." Sarah made him tea, kept him talking about his daughter, his plans for the future. By the time he left, it was past 8 o'clock. Well past when the diary had suggested the school boiler would have its incident. She drove back to the school herself, finding Henshaw in the basement, checking the furnace as he did every evening. "Still here, Miss Brook?" "Forgot some marking," she lied. "Everything all right down here?" "Right as rain, though there was a bit of excitement earlier. One of the pressure valves started whistling something fierce. Would have been a right mess if I hadn't been here to release it. Good thing Richardson didn't take my shift like he'd asked. Young man wanted the overtime, but I told him to get home to that baby of his." Sarah's blood chilled. "He asked for your shift?" "This morning. Just after you warned me about that floorboard, actually. Funny how things work out." That night, Sarah sat with the diary until dawn, mapping the changes. Richardson's entry had vanished, replaced with something else. A new disaster, 3 months hence. A chemical spill at the factory where half her students' parents worked. Preventable, if someone suggested an inspection at the right time. Her final date had changed again. December 20th, 2028. She'd lost almost a month this time. The mathematics weren't consistent. Some interventions cost days, others years. There seemed to be no pattern except that bigger changes, more lives affected, extracted higher prices. Sarah began keeping her own journal, documenting each change in a composition book she'd bought from the corner shop. She developed a system: red ink for disasters prevented, blue for new ones arising, black for the time lost. The pages looked like a war zone after 2 weeks. She saved 12 people from food poisoning by making an anonymous call about refrigeration at the local pub. Cost: 2 days. She prevented a traffic accident by leaving an unsigned note about brake problems on a stranger's windshield. Cost: a week. She stopped a child from drowning by suggesting to his mother, during a chance encounter at the grocer's, that the quarry was particularly dangerous this summer. Cost: 3 weeks. Each time, the diary rewrote itself. New futures spawned from her interventions, some better, some worse. She began to see the threads connecting events, how one person's survival created ripples that touched dozens of other lives. Mrs. Pargeter noticed her exhaustion. "You're looking peaky, dear. Are you eating properly?" Sarah wanted to laugh, or cry. She was eating when she remembered to, but how could she explain that she was reading tomorrow's disasters over breakfast, calculating the cost of compassion? "Just tired," she said. "End of term, you know." But it wasn't the end of term. It was April now, and Sarah had prevented 7 disasters. Her final date read October 3rd, 2028. She'd lost over a year. The pattern of her days shifted. Teach in the morning, prevent catastrophe in the afternoon, read the diary's revisions at night. She became expert at subtle intervention. The right word at the right moment. An object moved just so. A door held open a second longer than necessary. Her students thought she'd gone a bit odd. She'd sometimes stop mid-lesson, staring at one of them with an intensity that made them squirm. She was calculating, always calculating. If she saved Martin Holloway from the electrical fire next week, what would change? The diary suggested he'd become an electrician himself, inspired by his near miss. But his original future had him as a teacher, influencing hundreds of students. Which was better? Who was she to decide? The weight of choice crushed her some days. She'd sit in her empty classroom after hours, watching dust motes drift through afternoon sunlight, paralyzed by the responsibility. One evening, she found an entry that stopped her cold. May 15th, 1987. Sarah Brook hospitalized. Exhaustion, malnutrition, paranoid delusions about saving people, committed for observation, released after 3 months. Never the same. Dies alone, 2003. Her own future, if she continued this path without rest, without care. She laughed, sharp and bitter. The diary created its own feedback loops. By reading about her exhaustion, she'd take steps to prevent it, which would change the entry, which would create new problems. She was trapped in a web of causality with no beginning and no end, but understanding the trap didn't free her from it. The next morning's entry showed a school fire during assembly. 17 injured, 2 permanently scarred, all because of an electrical fault that could be prevented by flipping the right circuit breaker at the right time. Sarah flipped the breaker. Cost, 6 weeks. By June, she'd developed a reputation. Nothing she could pinpoint, just whispers, glances. Lucky Sarah, they called her. Always in the right place, always with the right advice. Some thought her psychic. Others suspected she was sleeping with someone in the council, getting inside information about safety inspections. Richardson cornered her one afternoon. His marriage had survived. He looked happy, healthy, unaware of the October suicide attempt she'd prevented. Sarah, I wanted to thank you again for that evening with your father's boiler. It was nothing. No, it wasn't. He leaned closer, conspiratorial. Helen's sister works at the school board. She heard there was a furnace problem that night, exactly when I would have been there if you hadn't asked for help. Would have been right nasty if someone had been nearby when that valve went. Sarah kept her expression neutral. Lucky coincidence. That's just it. You have a lot of lucky coincidences. The Marsh boy's insulin, the Patterson girl's appendix, that loose railing by the library. It's like you know things. I'm just observant. Richardson studied her. Behind his cheerful demeanor was a sharp intelligence, the same mind that would have made him a brilliant researcher if Sarah hadn't altered his path. My gran was Romani, he said finally. She used to say some people could see the patterns, the threads connecting things. Said they paid a price for it, though. Aged them. Wore them down like river stones. He touched her shoulder gently. You look tired, Sarah. Whatever you're doing, whatever gift or curse you're carrying, remember you're not responsible for everything. You can't save everyone. But that was the problem. She could save everyone, or at least everyone the diary showed her. The only question was the cost. Summer arrived hot and breathless. Sarah's final date now read March 8th, 2028. She'd lost almost 2 years, saving 43 people from various fates. The mathematics had become clearer, not in formula, but in feeling. She could sense the weight of each choice now, the temporal cost pressing against her chest like depth pressure. The diary itself was changing. The later entries, the ones from the 2020s, were becoming harder to read. Not illegible, something worse. They flickered, words swimming in and out of focus as if uncertain of their own existence. Sometimes she'd open to a page and find it blank, only for text to seep through the paper like developing photography. August brought the worst entry yet. August 15th, 1986. Town library fire. Historical archive destroyed. 1,700 irreplaceable documents lost. No injuries, but the town's memory erased. The Thompson twins never read the mining records that inspire their documentary. Chen never finds her grandmother's immigration papers. 23 family histories vanished. Immeasurable cultural cost. Sarah knew the library. She spent her Saturdays there, preparing lessons in the reading room that overlooked the high street. The historical archive was in the basement, papers dating back to the 1700s, birth records, death certificates, personal letters from the wars, the kind of primary sources that made history real for her students. But no injuries. That was the thing. No one would die. She could let this one go. She tried. For 3 days she tried. But every time she walked past the library, she saw Mrs. Hutchinson at the reference desk, carefully cataloguing new donations. She saw the teenagers in the back corner, pretending to study while passing notes. She saw old Mr. Garrett in the historical section, tracing his genealogy with trembling fingers. The fire would happen because of old wiring in the basement. A preservation issue, ironically, the climate control system overloading circuits installed in 1923. Easy to prevent. Just needed someone to suggest an electrical inspection. On August 14th, Sarah made an anonymous call to the fire department about strange sounds from the library basement. They found the hazard. The wiring was replaced. Cost, 3 months. But that night when she checked the diary, something had changed beyond the usual rewriting. A new section had appeared, wedged between 1987 and 1988. The handwriting was different, still hers, but younger, more like her current penmanship. October 30th, 1987. I understand now. The diary isn't prophecy, it's memory. I'm not preventing disasters. I'm remembering preventing them. The loop closes here. I write this diary in 2028, send it back somehow. It appears in 1986. I find it. I follow its instructions, creating the very future that leads to me writing it. No beginning, no end. Only the middle where I'm trapped. But here's what the diary didn't tell me, couldn't tell me, because I didn't know when I wrote it. The displacement isn't death. It's the moment I go back. The moment I become unstuck enough to place this diary where I'll find it. Every life I save makes me less solid in this timeline, more capable of sliding backward. I'm not losing years of life. I'm losing years of anchor. March 8th, 2028, isn't when I die. It's when I become temporal, when I slip through and write this diary and ensure it's found. Causality loop. Perfect. Horrible. Necessary. Sarah's hands shook. She flipped forward, looking for more revelations, but found only the usual entries. Disasters and preventions. Choices and consequences. She looked at her hands in the lamplight. Did they look less solid? Was she imagining the way light seemed to pass through them slightly, like holding paper up to sun? September came with unexpected rain. Sarah stood in her classroom, watching water streak the windows, when Mrs. Pargeter knocked. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." The visitor was a woman in her 60s, grey-haired, wearing a practical raincoat. She had Sarah's nose, Sarah's way of standing with her weight slightly forward, Sarah's habit of touching her bronze brooch when nervous. "You're not supposed to be here," Sarah said quietly. "No," the woman agreed, "but the rules are breaking down, getting thin. You're close now, aren't you, to the displacement?" Sarah knew she should be terrified, was terrified, but also, somehow, resigned. "You're me. I'm you. From just after. From the writing." The older Sarah looked around the classroom with fond sadness. "I'd forgotten how young we were, how certain that order and lesson plans could hold the world together." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why any of this?" "Because in the original timeline, the one before any intervention, something worse happens. November 12th, 1986. I can't tell you what. That would break the loop. But you'll read about it soon. And when you do, you'll understand why we chose this." The older Sarah moved to the window, pressing her palm against the glass. Her hand was translucent at the edges, light bending strangely around her fingers. "Every person we save creates ripples. The Thompson twins documentary changes public opinion about industrial preservation. Chen develops a treatment that saves thousands. Richardson's daughter becomes a teacher, influences a student who influences a student who... The chains go on. We're not just preventing disasters. We're building a better timeline, choice by choice. But the cost is ours to pay. We chose it. We'll choose it. Have chosen it." She turned back, smiling sadly. "The displacement isn't punishment, Sarah. It's just physics. Save enough lives, change enough futures, and you become incompatible with linear time. You exist in too many probability states. The universe's way of preventing paradox is to make you the paradox. Eternal, circular, outside normal causality. That's why the diary exists," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "It's not sent back through time. It exists outside time. You wrote it, I find it, I become you, you write it. No beginning, no end. Only the middle where we save people." The older Sarah was fading now, becoming harder to see. 2 more months. You have 2 more months before November 12th. Use them wisely. Save who you can. Then let go. Trust the loop. She vanished between one blink and the next. Only the handprint remained on the window, already evaporating. Sarah saved 12 more people in October. Each intervention cost her weeks, but she was beyond counting now. She could feel herself coming unstuck, catching glimpses of other timelines in her peripheral vision. Sometimes she'd see the same student twice, one version with a scar, another without. Reality was becoming negotiable. October 30th, she wrote the entry she'd found. The revelation about the diary's nature. Her handwriting looked exactly as it had when she'd read it. The loop tightening. November 11th came grey and cold. Sarah sat in her kitchen, diary open to tomorrow's entry. The one her future self had warned her about. The one that would explain everything. November 12th, 1986. Original timeline. Nuclear plant catastrophe. Wind scale. Mechanical failure meets human error. Radiation release. 400 dead within a month. 4,000 within a year. 40,000 cancers over the next decade. Britain's Chernobyl, but worse. Preventable only by someone being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time with exactly the right words. Below that, in different ink, this timeline, prevented. Sarah Brook makes anonymous call about suspicious activity near Windscale. Security heightened. Maintenance check discovers fault. Disaster averted. Cost. Complete temporal displacement. Sarah understood now. This was why her future self had accepted the price. Why she'd created the loop. Not for the small saves, though each mattered. For this moment. This prevention. She made the call from a phone box at dawn. Voice steady. Accent slightly altered. Reported suspicious individuals near the cooling towers. Suggested immediate inspection. Gave enough detail to be credible, not enough to be traced. By noon, the news was spreading. Mechanical fault discovered. Emergency shutdown. Crisis averted. Sarah stood in her empty classroom that afternoon, watching her students file out. Timothy Marsh, who would grow up to be a doctor instead of dying at 17 from radiation. Rebecca Chen, whose mother she'd already saved once. Richardson's daughter in her pram outside, who would live to see her own children grow. She felt it happening, the final unhooking, her edges blurring, time losing its grip. She had perhaps an hour left of solid existence. She spent it writing, not in the diary, that was already complete, already cycling back to its beginning, but a note left in her desk drawer for whoever would clean out her things. Gone traveling. Indefinite duration. Please donate my books to the library. Give Cromwell to Mrs. Pargeter. She'll pretend to be put out, but she loves cats. Tell my father I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye, but I've gone to help people, and he'd understand that. He always understood helping people. S. Brook. P.S. Check the basement behind the filing cabinet. You might find something interesting. The last thing Sarah saw clearly was her reflection in the window, transparent now, a suggestion more than a presence. She looked like a memory of herself, or perhaps a prophecy. Then she was elsewhere, elsewhen, in the place outside time where the diary lived, where she would write it, where it would cycle back to begin again. She understood she would exist here forever, not trapped, but stationed, a guardian of causality, ensuring the loop that saved 40,000 lives. In the basement of a small school in England, 1986, a leather-bound diary materialized behind a filing cabinet, smelling of copper pennies and burnt matches, waiting to be found, waiting to save the world, one small choice at a time. Somewhere, Sarah Brook, age 34, was about to discover it. She would think she had a choice about whether to act on its prophecies. She was wrong about that. The choice had already been made, would be made, was always made. But she was right about one thing. Every choice has a price, and some prices are worth paying again and again and again.